So last time we completed the 6 attainments, or what are called as the what is called as the Shat Sampatti. 6 attainments or 6 accomplishments, and of the sadhana chatushtaya, that is Viveka, Vairagya, Shat Sampatti, and Mumukshutvam are the 4 dimensions of sadhana. They have called as the sadhana chatushtaya. We have completed 3. We have completed the Viveka part of it, the Vairagya part of it, and then the Shat Sampatti. Each one individually, we have gone into all the 6 attainments. And the last one is what is called as Mumukshutvam. Mumukshutvam kim? What is Mumukshutvam is the question. Moksho me bhuyat iti ichha. The answer given is, let me attain moksha or liberation. This intense yearning is mumukshutvam. As I have been mentioning right from the beginning, the Tattvabodha is a preliminary text which gives you the fundamentals of Vedanta. Now, when the fundamentals are given, very detailed and in-depth answers are not given to the questions that are put. The reason is that let the aspirant understand the basics first, and then we may go slightly into the depth of it. Now here, to the question, what is mumukshutvam? The answer is, let me attain moksha or liberation. There is a great possibility of misunderstanding the statement. The intense yearning or desire to be free, to be liberated, to be emancipated, to attain what is called as moksha is mumukshutvam. Muktimicha mumuksha, muktimichuhu mumukshuhu. One who is desirous or intensely yearning for moksha. The catch here is, in the reply, he says, moksho me bhuyat. Let me attain, or moksha be mine, or I should get moksha. The catch is, the I is the problem for moksha. I want moksha is actually an oxymoron. It is self-contradictory, because in the, our spiritual path which we have selected or which we are trying to tread, the biggest hurdle is the I. The I is a kind of a creation of the environment. If we want to take a phrase from Jiddu Krishnamurti, see, if we analyze the nature of I, we find that it is an accumulation of experiences, knowledge, and memory. The memory of all our experiences and the knowledge we have gained is the I. And by definition, this I is limited. This I is fragmented. This I is very, very partial. And this is an accumulation. This is not the reality. This is not the truth of the being. This is only an accumulation over a period of time. Right from our birth onwards, we have accumulated this. Like I am one of my very favorite authors is Professor Ravi Ravindra, and he has a very interesting way of putting things. See, liberation is not of the self. Liberation of the self is a contradiction. It is actually liberation from the self. The self is the problem. One has to liberate oneself or completely dissociate or abnegate or cut off from what we call as the self, which is nothing but an accumulation. Like if I put a very simple question to somebody, starting from a child to a 90-year-old man or 100-year-old person, if we simply ask a question, who are you? We start by saying that I am so and so. The first thing comes is he'll give you his name. Like in that Sound of Music song, me a name I call myself. What is me? I call myself so and so. This is a very interesting, actually, a French expression. When you ask a friend in French, what's your name? He would not simply give his name, but he would say that I call myself as so and so. That is a French expression. Je m'appelle is what they use. So the first beginning point is we identify ourselves with a name. And if you see children, they will also point towards their heart or towards themselves and say, it is me. I am so and so. Now, if you say, is that all? Then we would go further and say, my parents are so and so. Then one would go further and probe and ask, is that the only thing which you identify yourself? Then he would say, I'm from so and so country, I'm from so and so state, I'm from so and so community, I'm from so and so city, and my parents, he will tell about his parents. My parents are employed here, or they do business, or whatever it is. He'll give the names of his parents. Then he will mention about his own class. I am in 5th class or 6th class or whatever class. Or somebody is in a college, he would say that I am a college student. And then further you go on probing, he would say I have a sister, or I have a brother, and so on and so forth. As we progress in life, now all this accumulation goes on increasing. Next is your education, your job, your company, your job profile. Then you get married, then you identify yourself saying that I am the husband of so and so or wife of so and so. Then if you have children, you will say I have these children. Then your family has increased, your friends has increased. The group, it goes on increasing and increasing. If you say, then you ask more, he will tell you about his nature of his job or his designation in the office, and you go on saying all these things. Now, the point I am trying to make it is all this you, or is there anything more than this? The question is, you may go on narrating right from your earliest memory in childhood to till date, whatever you have acquired, whatever you have accumulated, whatever you have undergone, whatever experiences you have undergone, whatever are the qualifications or other things you have acquired, all that is you or me, isn't it? That is what I am. Now the question is, beyond this, is there something? If we hold on to this question and become slightly sensitive to it, every one of us realizes that all this description is not completely me. There seems to be something else which I am not able to pinpoint, but recognize that I am that. Now, technically, suppose somebody loses all his memory. Suppose somebody loses all his memory. Is he existing or not? Is a question. Obviously, he is existing, but he doesn't remember anything about him. Absolutely, his memory is totally erased. His being is there. He is conscious. He is alive. He is able to move about. He is able to do so many other things, but he doesn't remember anything about himself. Now, that is only a hypothetical case where we are talking about, where all this accumulated aspect of a human being, which one calls as the I, is an accretion subsequent to his being there. He is there. Such a person is there. Everything else from that moment onwards is an accretion. Now, a month-old baby is there. He is there. But does he ever have an identity of himself or herself? Absolutely not. It is only the identity which we give. We may give a name, we may give a surname, we may do so many other things. But the fact of the matter is, he is pure being and he has no memory of anything and he has no identification of himself. Now, that is in a way, not exactly, but akin to, as an analogy you can take it, that is in a way being in a liberated state. In the sense, you have no identity of yourself. Moksha exactly refers to that. Moksha exactly refers to the complete abnegation of the self, in the sense that you are no longer limited by the accumulations or the qualifications or the attainments you have attained or gained throughout your life, which you may call yourself as I, and beyond that you may not recognize anything, but still there is a being which is not this I. Which is not this I. That is what is called as mumuksha or moksha actually. Moksha is that state where you have shed the limited identity of yourself. Your limited identity is the biggest problem. Because intuitively we recognize that I am something beyond this mere naming and accumulating and remembering and gaining some knowledge, which is actually the state of consciousness in which we function. It is this I. And the irony of the whole thing is, we hold on to this I so tightly because we are afraid of letting it go. If I let it go, what happens to me will be a very real point is that because one is holding on to this identity very tightly, which is actually a little bit of analysis can tell us that it is not the true self or the real self, but only an accumulation over a life period. The freeing oneself, the loosening the grip on oneself, or let it go, let the I go completely, is moksha. So I am yearning for that. I am yearning for that state of being where the I is totally absent and the I is an identity which is accumulated. This is the issue. So such a state or such a yearning, such an intense yearning is what is called as mumukshutva. Now, why this is important as a qualification is that a person who is intensely yearning to know one's true self has to be in a state of mind where nothing else is of any interest to him. Where nothing else is of any interest to him. One can't go on saying that I want to be this, I want to be that, I want to hold on to all these things and I continue to do all the things which I am doing, but still I want to be liberated or to be free or to attain moksha is an impossibility. You can't hold on to both because one is actually when you are holding on to the worldly things, On a constant basis, it is strengthening this I. Every experience, every acquisition of knowledge, every stored memory is only expanding the I. It's not contracting or diminishing the I. It's only expanding the I. The I of a 3-year-old child is actually very, very small. Very small in the sense he doesn't, there's no background also for him which goes on saying that I'm so and so, I'm so and so, I'm so and so, I'm so and so. Which for an elderly person becomes the permanent background. So you see the point? So this is the issue here. In Vedanta, we talk in terms of avidya and ajnana and the veiling of this and the covering of it and the false creation of this, all that, it's a subsequent issue. But fundamentally, understand the nature of this I. One needs to very thoroughly understand the nature of this I. This nature of the I, as we are calling it, is an accumulative process. Is only an accumulation. If there were to be no experiences, no knowledge and memory, there would not be any I at all. If the senses were to simply record things that are there outside, and if there is no brain mechanism, if there is no instrument called as the brain to record certain things, then there would not be any I at all. There would not be any learning process also from a worldly point of view. Not that it is not important. It is not, nobody says that the world is not important. The major issue is, what is it to which you are giving the maximum importance? Are you going on accumulating and strengthening this I and giving the maximum importance to this I? Or are you trying to identify your true self by progressively loosening the hold? Progressively loosening this hold is more important. When the I is completely absent, that state is what is called as moksha. So it has this question and answer has to be understood in that right context. Now the next one says, Etat sadhana chatushtayam. This is the sadhana chatushtaya. This is the fourfold qualification. These are the four qualifications one needs to acquire. Tataha tattva vivekasya adhikarino bhavanti. Thereafter, after having acquired these four qualifications, they become adhikaris, that the persons who are on this path, having acquired these four qualifications, become eligible or become fit for the inquiry into the truth. Tattva viveka. Tattva means the truth. What is that? The thatness of a thing, which is the truth. One becomes fit or eligible to tread the path, having become an adhikari. Adhikari means one who is eligible, who has acquired the required qualifications, who has, say, from a mundane point of view, you have passed the entrance test. You have passed the entrance test and you can now enter the portals of that institution or university or whatever it is from a worldly point of view when we say that. you have become eligible. So that is what it is. So simply these four qualifications, that is Viveka, Vairagya, Shat Sampatti and Mumukshutva. These four qualifications make you eligible. You become an adhikari. That means you have the right to acquire further wisdom, which is Tattva Viveka. You become an adhikari of what? Tattva Viveka. Tattva Viveka, as I said, is the inquiry or discernment or discrimination of what is true, of what is the truth. The next question answers this, what is Tattva Viveka? Tattva Vivekaha kaha. What is Tattva Viveka? What is this discrimination of the truth? Tattva Viveka. I am not deliberately translating this term Tattva Viveka because if we translate it into English, there is a danger of thinking that we have understood it. We have to be very careful. We have to be very much cautious about this danger of the English language, which gives us a false idea that we have understood things. It's not so easy. Discrimination about what is truth or the discernment of what is that, what exactly is the truth, is the meaning of Tattva Viveka. It is preferable to hold on to these terms. I think in an earlier session also I have mentioned that it's better one gets used to the Sanskrit terms so that we can contemplate on them and we will be honest to ourselves when we don't understand, unlike in the English language. See, the English sentences can be very wrong, but may appear to be all right. You see, there won't be any grammatical error unless you probe into it and look into it. There used to be a joke in our college days. See, actually, it was attributed to a professor who would say, both of you three sit together separately. Now, what is this both and three and sit together separately? The English part of it, when you utter that sentence, it may appear to be okay. But I am very careful about this English language because there's a lot of danger in this. But unfortunately, that's the only common medium available for us to communicate, and therefore we are using it. But to the extent possible, hold on to the Sanskrit terms. In reply to this question, Tattva Vivekaha kaha, the answer is Atma Satyam Tadanyat Sarvam Mithyeti. Atma alone is real. Atma Satyam. All things other than that are unreal. All things other than that the Atma alone is real, everything else is a mithya, is unreal. This firm conviction is called as Tattva Viveka. The firm conviction that Atma alone is real and everything else is false or unreal. The conviction one has of this particular statement is what is called as Tattva Viveka. So now the real problem, we are starting with the actual teachings part of it now. Actually, it is getting slowly complicated because the immediate question would be, what is Atma? Isn't it? When you say Atma is real and everything else other than the Atma is unreal, if I know what is real, then I will be able to identify everything else other than that as unreal. Isn't it? If somebody says this is real and everything else other than this is unreal, I need not go after the unreal because unreal is too much. It's too big and too many things are there. One thing only is real. So if you catch that one thing, you will not have any further problem. So this is the question. And he has given a simple answer saying, Atma Satyam Tadanyat Sarvam Mithyeti. Then we will go to the next one. Atma Kaha, as I said. The natural question is, what is Atma? Now the complication begins. Now, in order to explain Atma, he has to tell us so many other things which the Atma is not. So, the Upanishadic tradition or the Upanishadic way of inquiry is about denying or rejecting everything that is false. That is why it is called as the Neti Vada. Not this, not this, not this, not this. Not this. You have to reject it. Reject everything which is not that. See, very complicated subjects can be made easy by allegories and stories. There's a beautiful story which actually has come about in the South Indian tradition. Though Sri Rama and Sita are from the north, they belong to the whole of India, and there are several traditions all over the country. There's a very beautiful tradition in the South Indian states. A part of the marriage ceremonies, the girl after marriage accompanies the boy and is about to enter the house of the boy. That is her in-laws' place. Now what happens is all these girls and all, to play some mischief with the newly married girl, they accost her, they stop her at the entrance and ask, who are you? She gives her name. Then says, who is this man who is accompanying you? Nowadays, I think it has no relevance, but I'm talking about the age-old tradition, where the girl would be very shy to name the, pronounce the name of the husband. Obviously, they were very young also, and very shy to, speak out or say aloud the name of the husband. So this situation is created with Sri Rama and Sita. Now, when Sita is repeatedly asked, who is this gentleman standing beside you? She refuses to answer. She is very shy and she puts her, she avoids answering that. Then to tease her further, they would show somebody else and so, is he your husband? Then immediately she would say no. Because she knows who her husband is and what her name is. But if you point to somebody, immediately she would say no. Then they keep on pointing to all people, all the brothers of Sri Rama and others who are standing around, going on pointing out, is this Sri Rama, is this Sri Rama, is this Sri Rama? She goes on saying no, 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 no. When finally they come and point to actually Sri Rama and say, is he Sri Rama? Then also, then what she does is she doesn't answer. She simply bows her head again in that modesty. So here, when you actually identify, when actually the person is identified, when Sri Rama is identified, There is no reply. Now, the allegorical and the deeper meaning of this story or this tradition is that when you actually come to the truth, there are no words for you to utter at that moment. You have nothing to say. You know that this is not the truth, this is not the truth, this is not the truth. Every time you come across something, you reject it as not the truth. But when you come to the truth, you need not say that this is the truth, because words have no significance at that point. All words fail. Along with the mind, all the words, everything will recoil and come back. That is the famous quotation from the mantra from the Kathopanishad. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha. Yato vacho nivartante. From where words will recoil and come back. Along with the mind, manasasaha. That is the truth. So the procedure being adopted here is to mention certain important aspects of the whole human constitution and say that this is not the truth, it is beyond it. And because you cannot actually identify what is the truth, you identify it with some certain qualities attributed to that truth, attributed to what is called as the Atma or Atman. Atma kaha, what or who is Atma? The answer given is Sthula, Sukshma, Karana Sharirad, Vyatiriktaha, Panchakoshatitaha, San, Avasthatraya Sakshi, Satchidananda Swarupaha San, Yas Tishtati Sa Atma. You see, this is a long answer. Now the topic is getting complicated. Now he is mentioning three bodies. Three bodies, Sthula or the gross body, Sukshma or the subtle body, and the Karana or the causal body. It is other than these three bodies, Vyatiriktaha, other than these three bodies, this set of three bodies is the first thing. That means Atma is not these three bodies, not the Sthula Sharira, not the Sukshma Sharira, not the Karana Sharira. Fine. Then what? Panchakoshatitaha. It is beyond the five sheets. What are the five sheets? We come to it later on, but koshas are five. This is what is important to remember. So it is other than the three shariras and beyond the five koshas, having been such, it is avasthatraya sakshi. It is the witness of these three states of consciousness or three states of awareness. What are the three states of awareness or consciousness? The waking state, the dream state, and the deep sleep state. Jagrad avastha, swapna avastha, sushupti avastha. Jagrad, swapna, and sushupti. are the three avasthas or states of consciousness. We are in a waking consciousness, state of waking consciousness. When we go to sleep, we don't directly go to deep sleep. There could be an interlude of dreams. That dream state is called as the swapna avastha. Then the sushupti avastha, deep sleep state. These are the three states. Now, what is this Atma? This Atma is the witness of these three states. The Atma is avasthatraya sakshi. It is the witness of these three states. How do you say it is the witness of these three states? When you are awake, one is aware of oneself. Nobody needs to tell us from outside that I am there, isn't it? I am there. I know that I am there. This is self-awareness. In a dream state also, to some extent, sometimes you are aware of the dream. You are a witness in the dream also, or you are in a completely lost in the dream, and you are completely lost, totally lost in deep sleep state. But when you wake up, again, you are able to recognize the fact that I was dreaming and I was also in deep sleep, and I have enjoyed a deep sleep state of relaxation. But I was not aware of myself in that state fully, as I am aware in the waking state, but I am there. That I am there, that kind of awareness is there. That is called as the Sakshi Bhuta, being a mere witness to these states of awareness or consciousness. The fundamental point to be remembered is, he is mentioning not only that one is other than the three bodies and beyond the five koshas, but also he is not any of the three states of consciousness. He is not any of the three states of consciousness. What is he? He is a witness of the three states of consciousness. That's what is important. What is its swarupa? What is its essential form? What is the essential form of the Atma, Swarupa? Rupa is an external form, what is visible. Swarupa is the inner form or the essential form. What is the essential form of it? He says, Satchidananda Swarupaha. It is Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Sat refers to pure existence. What is there. What is the Sat. Chit is, here it is translated as knowledge, but it's not exactly knowledge, but I would say it is consciousness. It is more in the nature of consciousness. That is what is Chit. And Ananda is bliss or happiness, where there is absolutely no shadow of sorrow. But the meaning of Ananda is, it is pure bliss, a pure happiness. All mundane happiness we see, there are two factors to it. One is, always it is accompanied by the shadow of some kind of uncertainty or sorrow. And everybody through one's own experience knows that whatever happiness we experience from a mundane point of view, from a worldly point of view, comes to an end at some point or the other. At some point in time, the pleasure or sukha which we enjoy comes to an end. But this bliss is not of that nature. The bliss, neither the existence nor the consciousness nor the bliss which we are talking here has an end to it. What is exists. What is conscious also exists, and what is bliss also exists as it is. And these three aspects or the Swarupa is the essence of the Atma. Sachidananda Swarupa san yastisthati sa Atma. That is Atma. The definition of Atma is complicated, but the fact of the matter is each term will be again further explained. Sthula, Sukshma, Karana will be explained. Panchakoshas will be explained. The Avastha Traya will be explained. And also the Sachidananda aspect of it. Everything will be further explained as we go forward. Here, basically, he is giving an indication of what Atma is not and what Atma is. Atma is not the three bodies, is not the five sheaths, and is not the three states of consciousness, but it is the witness of the three states of consciousness, and its essential nature is Sat, Chit and Ananda. Again, please don't translate these terms Sat, Chit and Ananda into English. My humble request is hold on to these terms as Sat, Chit and Ananda. We can give explanation to these terms of Sat, Chit and Ananda, but don't equate Sat with existence and Chit with knowledge or consciousness and bliss, Atma, Ananda with bliss. They are not synonymous as we understand the English language. These terms are descriptive in nature. Whenever there are some terms which are descriptive in nature, they only describe partially, and no term, no word can describe any state of being, especially when we are talking about the essential nature of things fully. So the English terms are not the full equivalents of the Sanskrit terms Sat, Chit and Ananda. So please hold on to these terms, Sthula, Sukshma and Karana, the Panchakoshas, the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya, and Sat, Chit and Ananda, and also what is called as Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti Avasthas. So the definition of Atma is in one way quite comprehensive. Quite comprehensively, it has described what it is not and what it is in a comprehensive manner, but one needs to understand these terms at a much deeper level. We need to go into it much deeper. So we'll go one by one. What are these terms? The first term he has used is Sthula Sharira. So the question is Sthula Shariram Kim? What is the Sthula Sharira? Is the question. The answer is again Panchikrita Panchamahabhutaihi Krutam Satkarmajanyam Sukha Dukkhadi Bhogayatanam Shariram. Panchikrita Panchamahabhutaihi Krutam Satkarmajanyam Sukha Dukkhadi Bhogayatanam Shariram. Then he adds further, Asti Jayate Vardhate Viparinamate Apakshiyate Vinasyati iti Shadvikara Vadet Sthula Shariram. Now the first term is Panchikrita Panchamahabhutaihi. The Panchamahabhutas are the five elements of Prithvi, Apas, Teja, Vayu and Akasha. That is the earth, water, fire, air and Akasha. These are called as the Pancha Mahabhutas. Prithivyapas, Tejo, Vayu, Akasha, Pancha Mahabhutas. And there is a process called as Panchikarana. There is a process called as Panchikarana. Actually, there is a small book called Panchikaranam, again attributed to Adi Shankaracharya. There's a small book, small booklet kind of thing. It's a small booklet called as Panchikaranam, which is also attributed to Sri Adi Shankaracharya. Now, I'll not go into the depth of the Panchikarana process, but I'll tell you very basic aspect of the Panchikarana. Now, this Panchikarana is actually in a way a technical subject, and the proportions and ratios given, at least my understanding it is only for explanatory purpose, but how these are all brought together is an issue. See, you take the first of the Panchamahabhutas as the earth or Prithvi. Before actually these gross elements are formed, there are subtler Panchamahabhutas. There are subtler aspects of these Panchamahabhutas. The subtler aspects are what we are concerned with now, not exactly the gross aspect of earth, and it doesn't refer to the earth as a whole. It's only an element. These are called as elements. The 5 Panchamahabhutas are called as 5 elements. These elements in the subtler form are what we are concerned here with when we are talking about this Panchikarana. Now, suppose one takes 1 unit of earth, say 1 unit of earth. Okay. Now, assume this to be a kind of a disk, or let us say for our making it much more interesting, like you take it as a round pizza. You assume this 1 unit of earth as a pizza. Now first you divide it into 2 parts. You make it into 2 parts, half, exactly equal parts. You retain one half of it separately, make the other half into 4 pieces again. So you will have 1/8, 1/8, 1/8, 1/8 of a circle, or what you call as a disk. Now similarly, you make the other 4 or 5 elements of water, fire, air, and akasha. The subtler aspects. Please remember that this is subtler aspects of it. They are called as the subtler aspects. So you take water, you assume that it is 1 unit, take half of it separately and make the other half into 4. Now this Panchikarana is a beautiful process where these 4 parts, each 1/8 part of each element is added to the other. That means if you take half of earth, 50% will be earth, and 12.5%, 12.5%, 12.5%, 12.5% will be water, fire, air, and akasha. That makes one Panchikrita Panchamahabhuta. You understood this process? 50% earth, 12.5% each of the other 4. Similarly, when it comes to water, 50% of water and 12.5% of the other 4. So this is what is called as, very broadly, this is what is called as the Panchikarana. The Panchamahabhutas are Panchikrita, or Panchikarana process is undergone here, and that is the Shariram. The body is made of these 5 elements, which are Panchikrita, where the elements have undergone the process of Panchikarana. This is one aspect of it. The second aspect is Satkarmajanyam. This human body is acquired as a result of the good actions of the past. I will not go much into this aspect of it. See, any birth from a Vedanta point of view, where the aspect of karma and punarjanma or karma and reincarnation are taken as the factual and true aspects of it, the acquisition of a physical body in the human form, not that one acquires next life, one acquires some animal form or something else, that possibility is not there. I'll not give the explanation for that right now. When we come to these aspects of it, one realizes that it is more reasonable to assume that one continues to be in the human form because of the complication of the structure and the functions of the human constitution. So, generally, of an average human being, there is a greater proportion of goodness or contribution of good actions done in the past. That is a predominating factor. The body is also born as a result of that. Then the other aspect is sukha dukkhadi bhoga ayatanam. Ayatanam means a residing place, a place where one resides. What is this residential aspect of? That means what is this body meant for? For the experience of sukha, dukkha and other aspects. That aspects like pleasure and pain and so on and so forth. It is that place or that tenement or residence where one undergoes the experiences of pleasure and pain and so on and so forth. So that's the aspect of it, and therefore the Sharira is this. The Sharira is composed of the 5 Mahabhutas after they have undergone the process of Panchikarana. The Sharira is born as a result of good actions of the past, and the Sharira is the tenement which is meant for undergoing the experiences of pleasure and pain and so on and so forth. This is one. This is what the Sharira is. Then this Sharira has got a very important aspect, which is that it constantly undergoes modifications. It constantly changes. It modifies. The modifications are there. These modifications are identified as 6. Therefore, they are called as Shadvikaras. There are 6 vikaras or 6. Vikara means a modification. What changes? What doesn't change is avikara, which in the Bhagavad Gita they call it as avikara. Avyaktoyam, avikaryoyam. That's what the statement in the shloka in the Bhagavad Gita goes. So avikara is that which doesn't change or modify. That which modifies is the body. And what are these 6 modifications? First of all, asti. Asti means is. It is there. The body is there. The body is a physical reality. That's what is called as asti. Then jayate. It is born. Then the third one is vardhate. Vardhate means it grows. Vardhate is it grows. Viparinamate, it changes into various things. In this growth also, you find there is Kaumara, Yauvana, Praudha, Jara. That means it has the states of being a child, then a youth, then a middle-aged person, then an old person. So this is called as Viparinama. This is Viparinamate. It comes from Parinama, that which changes. Then Apakshiyate. Apakshiyate means it decays. It decays. Scientifically, we are told, I was told by a very reputed doctor, that the Indian, the ancient Indian tradition, where it is said that the Devatas do not age beyond 30 years. Therefore, they are called as Tridasha. One of the synonyms for Devata is Tridasha or 3/10, 30 years. So they remain at 30 constantly. They grow only up to 30, and after that, they don't change, they don't decay, they don't die. In the human body also, from a medical point of view, you find some kind of growth or something that goes on and on up to 30 years. Certain things stop at a certain age, certain things grow after a certain age, but whatever growth phase is there, it is only up to 30 years. After 30 years, it is only modification or changes happen in it, and the slow process of decay is there. Slowly from 30 onwards, one is decay. This decay process starts much earlier than what we think to be the truth. Even from a medical point of view, they say it is true that the growth, all kinds of growth stop at 30. After 30, it is only changes occur, physical changes, lot of physical changes occur, and the slow process of decay also goes on. Finally, vinasyati. Finally, it dies. These are the Shadvikaras. That is the gross body. The gross body has got, is subject to these 6 modifications of asti, jayate, vardhate, viparinamate, apakshiyate, vinasyati. It is there, it is born, it grows. It is there in the sense, it is very important to understand this asti. Asti is, the material is already there. The material for the creation of the human body is already there in the Panchamahabhutas. Panchamahabhutas, through the process of Panchikarana, he has mentioned that that is what is created. So the material for the body is already there. Even before the body is born. Even before the body is born, the material is there. And there is a gestation period of 9 months. So at that is asti, that it is there. That means the material is there, and the prenatal development of the fetus is there. So it is, that is the asti part of it. Then it is born, jayati. Then it grows. Then it changes. Then it decays, and finally it dies. These are called as the Shadvikaras. Now again, you see the beauty of it. The Vedanta has gone into these things in a very scientific manner also. Vedanta has tried to explain this in a very scientific manner so that we understand the nature of things. And the definition is very comprehensive. The body is created using the 5 elements. Then it is the result of our own actions. And it is the abode of all enjoyment, all experiences, whether pleasurable or painful, and so on and so forth. Then it has got these 6 aspects to it, 6 modifications that are there. All this together, we call it as the Sthula Sharira or the gross body. This is the gross body. This is what it is. So, in a very comprehensive manner, the description of this Sthula Sharira is given to us. I think it's already nearing 12:40. I have spoken for more than an hour. Sukshma Sharira, I think we can take it up next time. If there are any questions, we can go to that. Otherwise, if you want me to continue, I don't mind going forward. But if there are any questions, we have about 15-20 minutes to discuss. Yes, sir. I don't see any chat messages. What is the? There are some chats. Let me exit out of this sharing and then go to the chat. Yeah. Parth. What Atma is not the different, when Atma is not the different states of consciousness, but others are part of Atma, Atma's omnipresence and bliss would not be experienced by the body-mind complex. Since mind cannot visualize and body cannot experience this bliss or the omnipresence as any such experience is content of consciousness, the only fact that I am is the proof of Atma. One has to understand this, be with this understanding, as there is no other mental physical proof of it. Of course, there has to be a clear understanding of this and negation of falsity to actually understand this. Is my understanding correct? Parth, your understanding is substantially correct. The only point which I would like to add here is the term Atma is used for various things. Actually, I am preparing a note on this term Atma for the Bhagavad Gita study purpose. See, the physical body is also called as Atma. At one level, this physical body is real for me. It is there. And for most of us, this is the only thing that is real and more stable. Our feelings are not stable. Our thoughts are not stable. Our feelings and thoughts have no continuity. They keep coming and going like waves. So, the biggest reality for us is our own body. The body is real. So, this is reality at one level. But if somebody asks you a question, are you the body alone? Then you say, no, I am not the body alone. Then I say, my thoughts and feelings are also included in that. So I am my body, I am my feelings and my thoughts also. So I am a complex of this. Then if somebody further questions, and that also becomes an Atma then. The thought, feeling and volition aspect of it, which is generally called as mind by the Western psychologists, and this body put together is also called Atma at its own level. So this complex is now the Atma. From body we have progressed to the next level of complexity, which we call it as the Atma. Now if further we question ourselves, is this all? Is that the end of it? Is it you really? Or is there something else beyond this? Then you say, no, there should be something else, or I have a vague sense of being beyond my thoughts, feelings and body. How come do you have such a state of being? Then you refer to what is called as the deep sleep state. In deep sleep state, neither my body nor my feelings nor my thoughts are active. But when you come out of your deep sleep, you have a sense of having slept well, having relaxed, and having been there, though not aware of that when you are undergoing that process. Though one is not aware of oneself in any manner when one is in deep sleep, but when one comes out of that deep sleep, one is aware that during this period also I was there. So that becomes the Atma. So Atma is all this complexity, all these things put together, and at one stage, the dropping of all these things will, you will actually come to what the Atma is by dropping all these things, by the process. See, Vedanta is very clear that the Atman and Brahman are essentially one and the same. That is the fundamental principle on which the whole of Vedanta is developed, especially the Advaita Vedanta. The Advaita Vedanta says Atman and Brahman are in no way different. They are absolutely one and the same. But functionally, the Atman has become limited because it is unable to recognize its own omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence, which are the attributes of the Brahman. If at all we can say that the Brahman has got some attributes, which is not correct statement as such. You cannot attribute anything to the Brahman. But from a functional point of view, our presence, our potence, and our cognition are limited. These are the limitations which functionally create a disconnect between the Atman and the Brahman. Once this connection is re-established, once this limitation is taken away, then one realizes that the Atman and the Brahman are not two, but one and the same. So that is what one has to understand. Your general understanding is okay, there's no issue at all. But I wanted to add this dimension about the Atman. Atman can be right from the body onwards to the ultimate Brahman. All this together is what is called as Atman. Contextually. In one context, you call the body as the Atman. In another context, you call your body, your thoughts and feelings put together as Atman. Then you are being in a state of witness is also called as Atman. And then beyond that is also called as Atman. Okay? Now, the other question is by Janaki Ramji. The purpose or importance of understanding Panchikarana may please be explained in another talk specifically titled as such. Yeah, that we will take up, sir. Sometimes too much of analysis may also not be very necessary, but we will. I'll take out the important points from this small booklet of Panchi, which I don't agree. Some aspects with which I am not really in agreement about this Panchikarana also. That we can discuss, but too much of analysis is not necessary, but basically understanding what is Panchikarana, we can have another talk titled with that title. Atman alone is real. How knowing this helps a person to face or cope up every day in the waking state with the numerous challenges and problems of life? Now, sir, this is a very practical question and a very practical answer is there. The moment you deepen your understanding of who you are really, of who one really is, that understanding is one aspect of it. The more important aspect of it is when one is undergoing various challenges in life, when one is undergoing experiences, more than the challenges, let us call it as experiences, because challenge means something which you have to resist or overcome or something like that. That itself creates a duality. But let us talk in terms of experiences. All of us undergo all kinds of experiences. But fundamentally, do we not realize that all experiences in life are transitory? Yes or no? All experiences are transitory. What was very, very important at one time becomes a matter of, sorry, I'll just connect my charger to the laptop. 1 second. Okay. So, experiences one undergoes, all experiences, irrespective of the nature of experience, all experiences are transitory. Is this statement true to oneself or not? Whatever is transitory cannot be real. Whatever comes and goes, whatever does not stay, whether the body, whether the feelings, whether the thoughts, whether your ideas, whether your concepts, whether your major experiences in life. When we are 15, passing the SSC examination is the biggest challenge and the most important thing. After 10 or 15 years, one can look back and say, laugh at oneself and say, why did I become so serious at that time? Why was it? No, I got 2 marks less and I cried over that. And you look back and see the fellow who has actually failed the examination is doing much better in life. So, see, the transitory nature of experiences should become very clear to us. It should be very, very clear in our mind that all experiences are transitory by nature. If that is firmly established in one's mind, there is no challenge at all. Now, there is no challenge in life. There may be issues. There may be objective problems. There may be subjective problems. There may be something else. But there are no challenges as such. It may appear as a challenge because you are unable to overcome it. You are unable to adequately respond to it or react to it. That may become a challenge. But the moment you remember that any phase in life, however difficult it may be, it is going to pass. It's going to pass. There's a beautiful story of the, fortune cookies. Are you aware of the fact that fortune cookies are there? They put a slip, they put it on a wax paper, they write something and put it in a cookie before baking it. Like we used to get earlier, these weighing machines on the railway station where they would give your some prediction on the back of the ticket. Have you seen that? That was the very, we were very fascinated. You stand on it and you put 10 pies or 25, you get it, and then it will say something that tomorrow you are going to be very lucky or something like that on the back of it. Like this, we have these fortune cookies. Now, the beautiful story is that a gentleman was in a very difficult economic situation. He lost everything. Whatever he had, he lost everything and he didn't have anything much to do. And suddenly somebody gave him 2 cookies, these fortune cookies. Then he puts them in a jar and takes 1 cookie and breaks it, and in that he finds, it simply says, it will pass. That means whatever difficulty you are undergoing, it will pass. So he gets some confidence with that. It says, okay, this is transitory and it's going to pass and this will not be a permanent state. He recoups himself, he regains strength and he starts working hard. And after a few years, he again becomes quite rich and he is now very well to do and all that. Then he suddenly one fine day remembers that, yeah, what triggered me to do all this, extra effort and all was that prediction that it will pass, or that statement which I got in the cookie, and he remembers that he has another cookie left in the jar. So he goes back and takes it and breaks it open. Again, when he opens it, he finds it will pass. This prosperity which you are enjoying now will also pass. Just like the penury which you experienced or the poverty which you experienced at that time has passed, this prosperity is also. So our fortune cookies are all containing only one statement. It will pass. It will pass. So it is going to be, so the transitory nature of life, if we are very clear in our mind, then you can face any situation in life, any challenge in life. You can cope with any experience or challenge. It's not going to last. The only thing is, how well do you respond to it? The Atma Jnana, knowledge of the fact that Atma alone is real, will also put you on the right path. It will put on the right path. There is a very interesting verse, what are called, these are all anonymously written by various poets, but they have a deep moral significance and meaning. There's a beautiful couplet which says, Ajaramaravat prajno vidyam artham cha sadhayet gruhita iva kesheshu mrutyuna dharmam acharayet. He says that one should acquire knowledge and wealth. It also means wisdom and meaning. Vidya means knowledge at one level and wisdom at another level. Artha means money at one level and meaning at another level. So one should acquire knowledge and money and also wisdom and meaning, as though there is no old age and no death, as though I am going to be eternally there. That should be the attitude while acquiring knowledge and money or wisdom and meaning. But when it comes to dharma, he says, Gruhita iva kesheshu mrutyuna, as though death is pulling me up by the hair. Gruhita iva kesheshu, as though I am being held by my hair and being pulled by death. I should always follow dharma. Gruhita iva kesheshu mrutyuna dharmam acharayet. So the first one will allow you to, it will tell you how to lead a life in this world. The world is meant for acquiring wisdom and meaning and purpose for life. Whereas the nature of your actions should always be righteous. Dharma should always be the correct action, right action. And everybody, one need not tell the other fellow what is right and what is wrong. Innately, we know what is right and what is wrong. Even a child knows what is right and what is wrong. The golden rule is very, very simple. Behave with others as though you would want them to behave towards you. The whole life is meant for doing good deeds and abstaining totally from harming anybody. Paropakara punyaya papaya parapidanam. What is meritorious is paropakara. Doing what best you can do, what best kind of service you can render to others. And papa or the demerit is parapidanam. Don't hurt anybody. Basis of righteousness will be very clear once one at least mentally understands that Atma alone is real, and when we understand that everything in life as we experience is transitory, these two things will give you the strength, the moral strength, the physical strength, the courage, everything to face any situation, any experience, any challenge in life. That's what it is. And also, will it in any way prevent sleeplessness and deterioration in health caused due to these problems and related worry and regret? Obviously, there is nothing to worry or regret because it will pass. See, worry is a disease where you are imagining something to have, which is going to happen in the future based on your past experience. You are ruining your present. There is a past experience and there is a future fear. The past experience is creating the future fear, whereby we are simply ruining our present. So, there is nothing to worry, there is nothing to regret. When you are talking about regret, if you have done something wrong, the consequences of which are upon yourself, then what do? You correct yourself. But if you have done something wrong, whereby it has caused some harm to somebody, the best thing is to go and apologize and go and do amends to it. That will wipe out all regret. You need not carry regrets forever. Similarly, worry is a waste of tremendous energy. So, but unfortunately, we tend to, spoil our health, deteriorate our own the physical condition, and we have insomnia, sleeplessness, restlessness, and all that. All that is a problem. You can't really change the things around by any of these things. These are all negative factors which have to be understood in the right context, and understanding these two facts, that the Atma alone is real and everything else in life is transitory, is going to really help you. Now somebody is asking a much more fundamental question. Why at all real and unreal are created? This is a very, very see, there is a problem here. This is more of a theological question. And most of these things, the starting point, if we go by Vedanta, the starting point is only an explanation. We don't know the truth. Please understand this. My explaining why at all real and unreal is not going to really answer the fundamental question. The fundamental question is that manifestation comes into being through limitation. According to Vedanta, manifestation comes into being through limitation. And this limitation, in other terms, is what is called as ignorance, or avidya, or ajnana, or even maya. Manifestation, by definition, is limitation, and only in limitation we can have existence as we see around us. However vast the universe may be, it is still finite. Okay, so the basic reason, the manifestation occurs in limitation, caused by or attributed to what is called as veiling of the truth. I'll not go into this because Maya has got this Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti, the energy of veiling and projecting the wrong, what is not true, veiling the truth and projecting the untruth. So the entire Jagat is therefore called as a Mithya in Vedantic terms. But this is only a question for some kind of scholastic or philosophic discussion, and it's not really going to help you to come to the truth. See, I normally give this example. Suppose you are doing MSc Mathematics. I am addressing Mr. Venkatesha. Suppose you are doing MSc Mathematics and you have a nephew or somebody who is just 4 years old. He comes and asks you what is there. Tell me what is there in this mathematics, MSc Mathematics book. Then what will be your answer? Your answer will be, I cannot tell you what is here now. Because in order to come to this level of understanding, you have not even entered school. You are just 3 or 4 years old. You have not even entered school. You have to undergo 11 or 12 years of schooling, 2 years of intermediate course, 3 years of a degree course. That all put together would be about 17 years. After this 17 years of education, if at all you choose to select again mathematics as a subject, then you will be able to understand. This book will be your answer, isn't it? That will be the answer. Now, if that boy is adamant and he counter questions you and says, just because you are unable to answer my question, you are giving me all this nonsense of 17 years, 20 years, or 15 years, or whatever. Will that be a valid response of the child? It's an invalid response, but an adamant response which says that your inability to communicate the truth to me is what is causing you to give me all this nonsensical explanation. So in that context, what I want to tell you is that let us not trouble ourselves by these type of questions when we are, from a spiritual point of view, just entering the kindergarten section or the first class. There are several explanations. I can give you half a dozen explanations of why, but they are only explanations. They are nothing beyond that. All these explanations do not really explain anything because the truth is not known at our level. The truth has to be known at its own level. You cannot drag down the truth to our understanding and think that I'll understand this truth at this level. But very simply put, manifestation comes into being through limitation, and that limitation is the cause for the entire creation as we understand, and it comes out of avidya or ajnana. That is the simplest explanation, and I am very sure that this explanation is no explanation at all. This explanation could be some kind of an explanation to satisfy one's mental curiosity, but it's not an real explanation. The shortest definition for Atma is that which qualifies the reference to Aham for me, for another class. I am not able to understand this. Shortest definition for Atma is that which can you elaborate on this? I think it should be Mr. Commander Ramchandranji. Shortest definition of Atman is that which qualifies the reference to Aham. I am not able to get the exact meaning of the question. Somebody says, Ramesh Puttannaji, very profound subject, read with great clarity. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And then some Janaki Ramji, excellent and humorous. Venkatesha ji says, sir, it's clear and I understood it. I am grateful to you for this wonderful session. Thank you so much. Ramchandran ji, if you can speak on instead of putting it in the chat, you can unmute yourself and ask me the question or give the clarification for what you want.
Sarji, namaskar.
Namaskar. Yeah, tell me, sir.
No, this is from the one of the classes earlier we had, and the definition was for Atma was talked about, and there it is said that the one of the Shankara's book only, it says that the shortest definition for Atma is the reference, the reference to aham. Aham is, well, I mean, one's own.
Being.
Yes, and so the Atma is nothing other than
Our own being.
our own being as I, and I, aham.
Yes, our own
And
being.
that is our own being. That is exactly what was said.
That's what I said. No, I said in explanation to an earlier question. I said Atman at various levels. It is the me. It is the I.
Yes.
The I also. The Aham Brahmasmi. At one stage, this Aham becomes the Brahma.
Yes, sir.
So the Aham Brahmasmi is that statement.
Yes.
Where one of the Mahavakyas, where it tells you, where it makes it very clear to you,
Yes,
that
sir.
you are that universal consciousness. You are that universal consciousness.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. Gulu Advani ji, thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm so happy that you are taking keen interest and you are always a regular participant. Thank you so much. Any more questions?
Sir, I would like to know that you mentioned Atman as not body. It is bodies beyond the 5 sheets.
Yes.
So can it be referred as Nirvana Shatakam from Adi Shankara?
Yeah. That's what he says, no? That's what.
Yes.
See, in reply to a question by his guru,
Yes.
Govindapada, when he goes to Govindapada, the first question is, he says, who are you?
Who are you? Yes.
In reply to that, he says, Mano Buddhya Hankara Chittani Aham.
Yeah.
Chidananda Rupas Shivoham Shiva. That's basically, see, he was already in that state of consciousness where he realized that he is none of these things.
Yes.
So
yeah, it reminded me of that when you said, you were talking about it, it just got in front of me, that Nirvana Shatakam, the whole thing. I am Shiva, eternal Shiva, or Brahman, whatever it is. Yes. Thank you, sir. I just wanted to know that.
That's good, actually. Being reminded of the Nirvana Shatakam is correct, because that's what is the Atman, that is beyond all these things. Okay.
And it refers to as consciousness. I am Shiva, eternal Shiva.
Yeah. I am Chidananda Swarupa.
Chidananda Swarupa. Yes. Blissful it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.